I hereby conclude.
We in here, and what I want to talk about is the incorrectness of political correctness. So right now, I'm probably going to get some thumbs down, but I don't care. First and foremost, this has a story that I'm going to preface it all with. So back when I was in college, I was talking to my college is, man, if you think about the whitest place on earth, if you put like two black people there, that's pretty much my college at the time that I went there. So now they definitely have a lot more. In the last like 3 years, they've really been campaigning. I don't know why every black person they decided to find also speak Spanish, but I'm cool with that. Anyway, so I was talking to a group of white guys, obviously, because that's all there is to talk to. And at one point, I referenced black people. And it was funny because two other guys kind of were laughing. Because one person said, hey, you can't say that. You have to say African American. I was like, man, if you don't shut up, I am black and I'm saying it. Don't tell me what the correct term is. I never sit around with other black people like, oh, African American, yeah, haha. We just say black people. Shoot. So, and give you background where I'm from. I mean, there's all kinds of black people. There's all like, okay, if you're anywhere from the continent of Africa, you're just grouped together as the Africans. But then there's Jamaicans, Haitians, freaking people from Trinidad, people from everywhere, right? And I'm from Pittsburgh, so you getting to thinking I'm from New York or something like that. Nah, I'm not. I'm really not, because I don't want y'all to get it twisted. But anyway, so you can't just assume that somebody's an African American just because they're black, right? And we talk about, and I'm not even on some Pan African. One time, I was talking to this girl from Nigeria, but she had an American accent. She got a crazy last name though, and she was talking about black people saying they were African or something. So I had to jump in there and just messing around. I was like, dang, was you really from Africa or something? Are you taking this serious? And she was like, actually, I am. And I was like, then she started dancing. So I was like, oh, okay, well, obviously, because that's a rhythm that only comes from the motherland. But anyway, so I was like, yo, this, in my mind, like, this dude really just, and out loud actually, like, this dude really just tried to correct me and tell me I have to say African American. But here's the crazy thing. Two Italian folks have a kid, they're Italian American. Two Mexicans have a kid, they're Mexican American. Two Egyptians have a kid, they're not African American. They're not considered African American. Egypt is in Africa. Africa's a continent, not a country though. Remember that. We don't walk up to white people like, hey, European Americans. Nobody says that because it sounds dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Like, well, I hear people in the UK talking, like African Brits. Well, Brexit, so nobody's saying that. But you guys know what I'm saying. Like, nobody talks like that. African Canadians, like, it doesn't make sense. And I know that allegedly there was a group of black people that got together and was like, hey, we want to be called African Americans. But they probably didn't consult anybody on this, because I don't know anyone who would think that was okay. They just probably got together and was like, we're going to speak for all black people, whether they like it or not. And figure out a different term to isolate ourselves from Americans. And Al Sharpton was probably there. He needed to get used out of that perm, so he needed to find another divisive term. But for me, it made more sense just to call folks Negroes. I mean, it mean black. Now, the other word, different N-word altogether. Two different word etymologies, two different meanings. Do not get it twisted. It might start with an N, but it don't mean the same thing. Don't be saying that. But yeah, Negroes, Negroid race, technical term. I know now some say it reflects a specific population, but that makes more sense than African American if you're going to be talking about it. Like, when we talk about, say, well, American whites, Negroes, Chinese people, Asians, right? But if we're going to have a term like African American is always set on it. It's like a dichotomy of sorts. Like, you never just hear Americans and it's talking about everybody. If you're talking about American culture means white culture, Americans usually refers to white people. And when they want to talk about black people, it's always African Americans. And African Americans, the term African American subconsciously sends the message that African Americans are somehow sub-American. People will argue with this because it's politically correct to argue against it, and they don't want to admit it. But when you actually sit and think about it, it's like, yeah, because if the general term for the people of the citizenry is American, then anything that has a modifier on it is already a subcategory. And usually when we're breaking things down and mention race before American, it is, or nationality even, it's a subcategory. Like only time you say Mexican Americans, or even white Americans, Asian Americans, is when you're trying to be highly specific in a subcategory. But people just use African American all the time. It's like you don't know black people's included until they say African Americans. The United States population, including African Americans, people say no one talks like this. When you read your textbooks and you listen to TV, pay attention. People talk like this. We already know because we grew up in the culture is in the air. We know who's being talked about when they say what. They ain't not say, come out and say Negroes not included or Negroes here. But when you hear American versus African Americans, that's very different. You do not hear those terms the same. They have similar words. They both have the word American, but you hear them different. It's the same way when you hear like South America or Central America, you don't think United States. Some people, they hear North America and they're like, haha, yeah, United States, not realizing Mexico and Canada are also part of North America. Some people do not even realize that our continent is North America. But for them, I don't think they're ready to even receive what I'm saying because their intellect is not up to par. But still, that's what I'm saying. Being politically correct, not to deviate from what I'm trying to say or digress, it's not really correct. Because you have to ignore how things actually function in reality to do it. And a lot of times you have to be just completely ignorant or willing to ignore a lot of things. So in that moment, they were trying to be politically correct, but really I just ended up getting insulted. So it's like, you're insulting black people. It's like, you just literally insulted a black person by trying to correct me to say the politically correct term. Like, newsflash, I'm not an African American, right? Like, I don't know, like, what the heck is that? African American. Like, I don't, like, do I look like I came out of Wakanda or something like that and took the citizen test? If y'all never seen any depictions of Wakanda, there's no light-skinned people there. Like, there's none. Anyway, there's that white dude who showed up, but he's from the outside. Anyway, though, so that's all I'm saying. And of course, that's not ignoring the whole Pan-African thing where we have people of African descent. That's completely different because, to be honest, if we're going to do that, and that's what we're defining as African Americans, then that means there's a whole lot of people in those Latin American countries that technically are African American, but we're not. That's not how we're doing the term. The term, I find the term myself offensive because it still makes it easy to distinguish between American citizens. It still makes us sub-American, and even though being a minority in the country, I know a lot of the propaganda and American imagery that they put out there is bullcrap. I'm still an American, still proud to be an American, and even though we might not uphold what the flag and all that stands for at all times, I do appreciate that we have at least the ideals to strive for and hold us accountable, or at least to say, hey, we're not measuring up. Because if you don't have at least something to measure yourself against, that's one thing. So I just want you guys, I'm going to sign off here. I just want you guys to remember that being politically correct isn't always correct. And sometimes it's better to be correct. You may think that you're doing a good job, but sometimes you got to call a spade a spade. Don't call a black person a spade, that's racist. But if it's really a spade, you got to call it what it is, because sometimes can't worry about hurting people's feelings. That's the thing. That's how, excuse me, that makes it worse. You can't worry about hurting people's feelings all the time. You can't, now don't just go out of your way and hurt people's feelings. Always tell the truth, demonstrate the truth in love. Definitely firm Christian principle, but at the same time, don't be so afraid to speak, to say certain things, to paint things the way that they are. If it's wrong, it's wrong. If it presents problems or difficulties, it presents problems or difficulties. Because I will say one thing, that at least as far as my life is concerned, half of the politically correct things or behaviors that white counterparts express or try to express towards their minority friends, I mean, like even Asians, Latinos, all those, it's not correct. It's politically correct when people are talking about it in mainstream bullcrap America, right, and on TV and stuff. But when you really talk to people on the street and you interact for real, it's highly offensive, especially when you assume that adults, humans of dignity, integrity, are need to be treated like babies. That's something that used to happen a long time ago. Not a long time ago, but like back before all this civil rights stuff got kicked off. They used to portray, especially black people, as helpless babies that needed to be taken care of by the white majority, and we're helpless and we're doomed without their help and all that. That's racist. That's looking down on someone. So realize that, and realize that in being politically correct, you're pretty much being discriminatory, because you're saying these people aren't able to deal with the truth and they're not able to handle it. We need to handle them with kids' gloves. And if you're somebody who gets offended at stuff you shouldn't be or can't handle the truth, then you do need to be handled with kids' gloves, and you're a part of the problem too, and you're a baby. How you gonna act?